Everyone thinks they know the story of David and Goliath. A giant. A shepherd boy. One stone. But here's the problem. The Bible never calls Goliath a myth, and it never treats him like a cartoon villain. It gives measurements, armor weight, weapon size, military rank, which means this isn't a fairy tale. It's a physical reality. So the real question isn't whether Goliath existed. It's this: how big was he? And more importantly, why does his size still matter today? The book of 1 Samuel says Goliath was 6 cubits and a span tall. That sounds ancient, vague, almost poetic. Until you convert it. Depending on the length of the cubit used, Goliath stood somewhere between 6 feet 9 inches and over 9 feet tall. Even at the lowest estimate, he would have towered over nearly every man in Israel. At the highest estimate, he would have been one of the largest humans ever recorded in history. In a world where most men were much shorter, he would have stood out instantly, like a modern professional athlete dropped into an ancient army. In a crowd, his head wouldn't just rise slightly above the others, it would have been unmistakable. Stand him beneath a standard doorway, and he would have nearly brushed the top. Place him beside an average soldier, and the difference wouldn't be subtle, it would be obvious at first glance. He wouldn't have looked mythical, just overwhelmingly larger than the men around him. But height was only the beginning. The text says the coat of mail he wore weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. That's roughly 125 pounds, just the armor. That's like strapping the weight of a fully loaded Olympic barbell across your chest and walking into battle. Most men would struggle just to lift that much weight off the ground. He wore it. It's the equivalent of carrying a heavy child, except made entirely of bronze. Before he ever lifted a weapon, he was already moving under more weight than most men train with today. The armor alone was a test of strength before the fight even began. His spearhead alone weighed 15 pounds. The shaft of the spear was described as thick as a weaver's beam. The shaft wasn't thin and elegant. It was closer to a small tree trunk than a typical spear. For most men, lifting that spear would require effort. For him, it was standard equipment. This wasn't a weapon designed for speed. It was built for impact. Everything about it suggested mass and force. And he carried a sword, a javelin, and a shield bearer who walked in front of him. This was not a brute, swinging wildly. This was a professional warrior, a walking siege weapon. Goliath was designed to terrify, and that terror worked. For 40 days, the armies of Israel stood frozen. Morning after morning, evening after evening, Goliath stepped forward and issued the same challenge. Choose a man, send him down, let us fight. If I lose, we will serve you. If I win, you will serve us. No one moved, not the soldiers, not the commanders, not even King Saul, a man who stood head and shoulders above everyone else in Israel. Fear had already done its work, because Goliath did not need to fight to win. He only needed to be seen. This is something modern readers often miss. Goliath was not just a giant. He was psychological warfare. His size communicated inevitability. His armor communicated invincibility. His voice communicated dominance. Every time Israel looked at him, they were reminded of what they were not. And fear always works the same way. It magnifies the problem. It minimizes the person facing it. And it convinces people that resistance is pointless. That is why no one volunteered. Until David arrived. David was not sent to fight. He was sent to deliver food. He was young, unarmored, and completely unimpressed. While everyone else measured Goliath by his size, David measured him by something else: defiance. Not against Israel, but against God. David did not see a giant. He saw a boundary violation, and that changed everything. When David offered to fight, Saul tried to slow him down, tried to protect him, tried to fit him with armor. But the armor didn't fit, because David was not meant to fight this battle the way others expected. Instead, he chose a sling. To modern ears, that sounds primitive, almost childish. But historically, the sling was a deadly weapon. In the hands of a trained user, it could launch stones at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, with accuracy and with lethal force. This was not luck. This was precision, and David knew exactly where to aim. When the stone struck Goliath's forehead, it was not symbolic. It was anatomical. The forehead was the weakest point, not protected by armor. A direct hit would cause immediate neurological collapse. The giant fell before he ever raised his sword. The battle ended in seconds, and suddenly, everything changed. But here is the part most people overlook. The story of David and Goliath is not primarily about courage, or faith, or even victory. It is about scale, because what looked unbeatable from a distance collapsed when confronted correctly. Goliath's size was real, but it was not ultimate, and that distinction matters. Every generation faces its own giants. They may not wear armor, they may not stand 9 feet tall, but they use the same strategy. They intimidate, they overwhelm, they convince people that resistance is foolish. David's victory did not come from ignoring reality. It came from seeing it clearly. He did not pretend Goliath was small. He understood that something greater stood behind him. That perspective is rare, and it is costly, because it means stepping forward when others stay silent. It means acting when fear feels justified. It means trusting truth over appearance. That is why this story has survived thousands of years. Not because of spectacle, but because of relevance. Goliath represents the moment when fear tries to pass itself off as wisdom, when caution becomes surrender, when people accept defeat before the fight even begins. And David represents something dangerous to fear, faith that acts. The Bible never promises that giants will disappear. It promises that they are not final. It never says fear won't rise. It says fear doesn't get the last word. And that is why this ancient story still speaks to the modern world. Because the question it asks is timeless. Not how big is the giant, but who are you measuring it against? Goliath fell, not because he was weak, but because he was limited, and every power that intimidates humanity shares that same flaw. It looks permanent until it isn't. It looks unstoppable until it falls. The story of David and Goliath is not about a boy becoming brave. It is about fear being exposed. And once fear is exposed, it loses its power. That is why this story still endures, why it is still told, why it still matters. Because giants still exist. But so does truth, and truth, when confronted directly, still brings giants down.